A teenager disappeared in Białowieża forest in 1997. In 2012, foresters discover an alarming diary. Mist was lazily hovering over the forest floor of Białowieża forest as Marek Borowski and Tomasz Lisiecki were conducting their routine forest patrol. The October morning of 2012 was exceptionally cold, and the dampness seeped through their service jackets. Marek, a 40-year-old forest manager with 20 years of experience, knew this part of the forest like the back of his hand. Tomasz, a decade younger, had only been working at Białowieża National Park for 3 years. "Look at these tracks," Marek said, pointing to the ground as he knelt by the prints. "A bison passed through here last night." Tomasz bent down with interest when suddenly something unnatural caught his attention among the roots of a nearby oak tree, something that didn't belong to the surrounding environment. "Marek, there's something there," he said, approaching. The tree dot in a hollow between a massive root and the earth. There was an object covered in moss and dirt. Tomasz carefully pulled it out and brushed off the dirt. In his hands was a small leather notebook, worn by time but still in surprisingly good condition. This might be a journal or diary, Tomasz muttered, gently opening the first page. On the yellowed paper, a neat, youthful handwriting appeared, with a date, July 15th, 1997. "Damn," Marek whispered, peering over his shoulder. This could be related to that case. Tomasz looked at him questioningly. "What case?" 15 years ago, in the summer of 97, a teenage boy went missing here. He was never found. I was just a young intern back then, but I remember how the whole province searched for that kid. Kacper Wilczak. That was his name. Tomasz flipped the page and saw the name written there. Property of Kacper Wilczak. "It's him," he confirmed, showing the inscription to Marek. "Do you think we'll finally find out what happened to him?" Marek sighed deeply. His gaze wandered over the dense forest as if searching for an answer among the ancient oaks and spruces. "We'll inform the park directorate and the police. This could be a breakthrough in a case that's been haunting the locals for years." Within hours, the spot where the diary was found was cordoned off with police tape. Officers, a forensic technician, and a district prosecutor arrived. The diary was placed in a plastic evidence bag, but before that happened, Marek noticed a few lines. On the first page, "My name is Kacper Wilczak. I'm 16 years old. If anyone is reading this, something probably went wrong. I went on a trip to Białowieża forest with my classmates. Today is July 15th, 1997. I promised my mom I would keep a journal of the trip. In the evening, an extraordinary meeting was convened at the headquarters of Białowieża National Park. In a small conference room, representatives from the park's management, the police, and local authorities gathered. On the center of the table lay the diary, now dried and secured by specialists. The prosecutor gave his consent to read the contents of the diary in order to identify potential search locations. "The entries may indicate where we should resume the search," announced Commissioner Andrzej Kamyowski, a 50-year-old man with graying temples. "After 15 years, it's hard to expect to find Kacper alive, but his family deserves closure on this case," said Helena Malinowska, the park director, who was sitting at the head of the table, nodding. "Kacper's parents still live in Hainoka," Marek added. "His father never reconciled with his son's disappearance. He's been organizing private searches for years." The commissioner carefully opened the diary and began reading aloud. Silence filled the room as the first words of the teenager from 15 years ago filled the air. Words full of youthful enthusiasm, unaware of the fate that awaited him. Tomasz watched the faces of those gathered, tense, focused, some clearly moved. He himself wondered what story this unassuming, leather-bound notebook would tell. Would they find out what happened to young Kacper Wilczak in the depths of one of Europe's Last primeval forests? Would the diary contain the answers that had been sought for 15 long years? Outside, twilight fell, and Białowieża Forest plunged into darkness, guarding its secrets. Secrets that might just be starting to come to light. Hinoka. June 1997. The sun had just risen, but Kacper Wilczek was already up. The 16-year-old boy sat on the windowsill of his room, gazing out at the panorama of the small town on the edge of Białowieża Forest. He had a slim build, dark brown hair, and piercing green eyes, unusual for these parts. The residents of Hinoka often joked that he had inherited them from some ancient forest spirit. The Wilczek family home stood on the outskirts of the town. It was an unremarkable one-story building with a small garden where Kacper's mother Irina grew vegetables and herbs. In the distance, the dark band of the forest loomed, ancient and mysterious, evoking both respect and fear. "Kacper, breakfast!" called his mother from downstairs. The boy jumped off the windowsill and glanced at the desk where a new leather diary lay. A gift from his father. Bogomil Wilczek, a local carpenter with a passion for traditional craftsmanship, had given it to his son for his upcoming birthday, though he had officially said it was for the trip. "You'll be able to record your adventures," he had said when handing him the carefully bound notebook. "Every experience is worth remembering." Kacper descended to the kitchen, where his parents were already sitting at the table. Irina, a woman with a warm smile and perpetually worn hands, was serving scrambled eggs onto plates. Bogomil, a tall man with broad shoulders and a thick beard, was reading the local newspaper. "The trip is in 2 weeks, and you haven't packed your bag yet," Irina remarked as she placed a cup of tea in front of him. "Mom, I still have plenty of time," Kacper replied, reaching for a slice of bread. "Besides, Wiktor promised to lend me his tent." Wiktor Moravsky was Kacper's best friend since preschool. He had come up with the idea for the trip to the forest. Together with 2 other classmates, Nikodem Zayak and Grzegorz Lipewski, they planned to spend a week camping in Białowieża Forest. 4 days in the forest is no joke, said Bogomil, setting aside his newspaper. "The forest is not a city park. It's easy to get lost there." "Dad, you know I know the basics." "Of survival," Kacper protested. "Besides, Grzegorz is the son of a forester. He knows these areas well." Bogomil sighed. He was worried, but didn't want to suppress his son's independence. He himself had spent a lot of time in the forest as a young man, collecting wood for his carpentry workshop. "Just remember the safety rules," he said finally, adding that there were parts of the forest where there was no phone signal. Kacper was an exemplary student at the high school in Hinoka. Kacper Wilczek, a 16-year-old student with a passion for biology, was excited for his upcoming trip to Białowieża Forest. He had a natural talent for the sciences and dreamed of studying biology in Warsaw. His biology teacher, Mr. Nowicki, saw potential in him to become a researcher, contributing to the protection of the unique ecosystem of the forest. That afternoon, after helping his father, Bogomil, finish a wooden box, his father mentioned something that caught Kacper off guard. "I heard Emil Zawadzki's back," he said. Emil, a local recluse who had left Hinoka years ago to live deep in the forest, had been the subject of rumors. Some said he was a weirdo, others that he was a former forester who had argued with the park's administration. "I thought he left for good," Kacper replied. "Apparently, he's living now in an old forestry lodge by the Hutaunia River," his father continued. "If you head out that way, keep your distance from him. I'm not saying anything bad, but some people choose isolation for a reason." That evening, Kacper met his friends at the Hinoka market, where they discussed their upcoming adventure. "We should start from the northern part of the forest," said Grzegorz, sketching a map in the sand. "There are the best camping spots." "What about the strict reserves?" asked Nikodem, the cautious one in the group. We'll stick to the approved paths, Gerzigers assured him. Victor, a tall boy with light hair, nudged Kakper. Heard about that poacher supposedly seen around? A poacher? Kakper asked. Intrigued. Some guy setting traps for deer and wild boar, Victor explained. My uncle at the forestry office said they tried to catch him, but he knows the forest like the back of his hand. Maybe it's Zavatsky? I don't think so, Kakper replied. Dad said Zavatsky's an ecologist who argued with the park about tree protection. As the sun set, Kakper gazed toward the dark line of trees on the horizon. In 2 weeks, he and his friends would be there, deep in one of Europe's last primeval forests. A mixture of excitement and unease gripped him. Something told him this trip would change his life, though he didn't yet know how. Back home, Kakper thought about the diary his father had given him. He had promised to document the trip, not just for himself, but for his parents, who would no doubt worry. He never imagined that this leather-bound notebook would become the only testament to the events that would unfold. The last day of school in Hinjo. Hinoka High School was filled with excitement for the upcoming summer, but for Kakper, it also marked the countdown to his great adventure. Remember, next year is the Matura exam, his teacher, Mrs. Jarzabiska, reminded him as she handed him his report card with honors. With your grades, you should think about good universities. Kakper smiled modestly, proud of his achievements. But that day his thoughts were consumed by the adventure ahead. After the ceremony, Kakper and his friends, Victor, Gerzigers, and Nicodem went to the Lena River, where local youth traditionally celebrated the start of summer. They built a small fire, roasted sausages, and made plans for the trip. I went to a hiking store in Białowieża yesterday, Gerzigers said, pulling a small device from his bag. I bought a GPS. My dad showed me how to use it. Seriously? Victor asked, impressed. That must have cost a lot. Not too much, my dad pitched in, Gerzigers said. He said it's an investment in safety. Kakper turned the GPS in his hands, marveling at the technology. In 1997, cell phones were just starting to become common, and the internet was a luxury for few. My dad keeps saying we shouldn't rely on electronics in the forest, Kakper remarked. He says a compass and a map are more reliable. That's why I'm bringing both. Gerzigers laughed. But admit it, GPS is a cool gadget. A few days later, Kakper helped his mother, Irena, in the garden. Irena, a talented herbalist, knew the properties of the medicinal plants she grew better than anyone in the area. I've packed a first aid kit for your trip, she said, pointing to a small cloth bundle on the table. There's ointment for bites, St. John's wort tea for cuts, and a few other useful things. Kakper walked over and hugged his mother tightly, knowing how much she worried about him. Thanks, Mom. Everything will be fine, I promise. Irena hugged him back, then pulled away to look him in the eye. I know you're sensible, Kakper, but remember, the forest isn't just any woods. It has its own life, its own secrets. My grandfather always said you have to respect it. On the eve of the trip, Kakper sat in his room packing his backpack. Neatly laid out on the bed were his sleeping bag, spare clothes, flashlight, waterproof, matches, a pocket knife his grandfather had given him, and of course, the diary. He wondered what he should write to start. He opened the first page and stared at the blank sheet for a moment before beginning to write. My name is Kakper Vilcek. I'm 16 years old. If someone is reading this, something probably went wrong. I'm on a trip to Białowieża Forest with my classmates. Today is July 15th, 1997. I promised my mom I would keep a journal of the trip. He paused, thinking about what to write next. After a moment, he added, I don't know what to expect from this trip. Gerzigers says we'll see bison, but I'd rather find rare plants, especially orchids. Mr. Nowitzki would be proud if I came back with some good photos. Oh, and I'm bringing my grandfather's old Zenit camera. Just then, Irena knocked on the door. May I come in? Sure, Mom. Irena sat on the edge of the bed, watching her son back. Remember when you were little and afraid to go? Into the woods? She asked with a smile. Kakper chuckled, slightly embarrassed. I was about 5. I used to say there were wolves in the forest that would eat my feet. And now you're heading straight into the heart of the forest. Irena sighed. Children grow up so fast. For a moment, they sat in silence. Finally, Irena took a small wooden object from her apron pocket and handed it to Kakper. This is from both of us, me and your father. It was a small, hand-carved bison, a symbol of Białowieża forest. Bogomil must have spent hours perfecting every detail. It's beautiful, Kakper whispered, turning the figurine in his hands. Dad says the bison represents strength and endurance. You'll need that in the forest. Irena smiled softly. That night, Kakper couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and imagining the adventure ahead. He didn't know that this would be his last peaceful evening. He didn't know that soon his name would appear on the front pages of local newspapers. He didn't know that Białowieża Forest would become both his salvation and his trap. Outside, the trees whispered, as if warning him of what was to come. But Kakper, too excited for the adventure, didn't. Listen. The morning of July 15th, 1997, greeted Hainoka with sunlight breaking through a light mist. Kakper woke up before his alarm, full of energy and excitement. When he went downstairs with his backpack slung over his shoulder, his parents were already at the table. Irena had prepared a hearty breakfast, and Bogomil was sipping coffee, studying a map. I spoke to Gerziger's father yesterday, he said, as Kakper sat down. He promised to pick you up in 4 days at the Pear Forestry Lodge. He pointed to a spot on the map. I know, Dad. Gerziger's planned everything, Kakper replied, loading his plate with scrambled eggs. And remember, no risky business, Bogomil added, folding the map. The forest isn't a place for fooling around. At 8 a.m., an old Polonez pulled up in front of their house. Gerziger's, Victor, and Nicodem got out, each carrying heavy backpacks. Finally, Victor shouted when he saw Kakper. I thought we'd have to drag you out of bed. Irena followed Kakper outside, holding a paper bag. I packed sandwiches for the trip, she said, handing the package to Gerziger's. And remember to drink. Plenty of water. July can be tricky. You can get dehydrated quickly. The goodbye was brief, though Kakper noticed his mother holding back tears. His father gave him a firm pat on the back. Take care, son, he said quietly. And remember, what? I told you about Emil Zawadzki. Kakper nodded and got into the car. As it drove away, he saw his parents standing in front of the house, their figures growing smaller in the rear view mirror until they vanished around a bend. It took them less than an hour to reach the designated entrance to the forest, Gerziger's. Father, Mr. Lipitsky, dropped them off at a small parking lot by the woods. I'll be waiting for you in 4 days by the lodge, he reminded them, handing Gerziger's a small battery-powered radio. Some parts of the forest have radio coverage for forest rangers. If anything happens, try to contact them. As the car drove away, the 4 friends stood for a moment, staring at the wall of trees ahead. Białowieża Forest, Europe's last primeval. Forest, home to bison, wolves, and lynx. A place where some trees had been standing since the time of King Jagawo. Let's go, guys, Gerziger said, adjusting his backpack and pulling out a map. The first part of their route followed a marked tourist trail. They passed massive oaks, hornbeams, and linden trees, each hundreds of years old. The forest was alive. Birds chirped from the treetops, and deer occasionally darted between the trunks. "Can you smell that?" Kakper asked, stopping and inhaling deeply. "There's no place that smells like this." "It's just a forest," Victor laughed. "But you've always been weirdly attached to trees." After a few hours of walking, they reached a small clearing and decided to take a lunch break. They sat on the grass, eating sandwiches Kakper's mom had packed Dot about 3 kilometers from here. "The less traveled part of the forest starts," Gerziger said, studying the map. "If we want to see bison, that's where we should go." "What about the reserves?" Nicodem, the cautious one, asked. "Aren't some parts of the forest off limits?" "Don't worry, I know where we can go," Gerzigers reassured him. "My father has worked here for 20 years. I know all the allowed trails." After the break, they continued on. The path grew narrower until it eventually disappeared altogether. Gerzigers led them using a compass and map, checking their position with the GPS now and then. "We're about 5 kilometers from the nearest village," he informed them late in the afternoon. "This is a good place to set up camp." They found a small clearing surrounded by dense spruces. The ground was dry, and a nearby stream provided water. They quickly set up 2 tents and began gathering firewood. Always check if the wood's inhabited, Kakper instructed, tossing aside a piece of bark to reveal a cluster of ants. "We don't want to take anyone's home." As the sun began to set, they sat around a crackling fire, roasting sausages on sharpened sticks. Victor pulled out a small metal canteen. "Anyone want a drink?" he asked with a mischievous grin. Bad didn't even notice I borrowed some of his homemade liquor. "Are you crazy?" Kakper shook his head. "In the forest, you need a clear mind. One misstep and you could twist your ankle." "Come on, it's just a sip," Victor insisted, but seeing Kakper's stern look, he shrugged and put the canteen away. Fine. Gerziger spread out the map and by flashlight showed them the plan for the next day. "Tomorrow we'll head toward that old oak," he said, pointing to a spot on the map. "It's over 300 years old, a real attraction. If we're lucky, we might see bison at the waterhole." After they finished planning, Kakper pulled out his journal and began recording the events of the day, their journey, the animals they had seen, and his impressions of the first day in the forest. Meanwhile, the others were preparing for bed. "What are you scribbling down?" Victor asked, peering over his shoulder. "I promised my parents I'd keep a journal," Kakper replied. "Besides, it's a good way to remember all the details. In 20 years, it'll be nice to read this." He didn't know how prophetic his words would be, but in a way he couldn't have imagined. That night, lying in his sleeping bag next to the snoring Victor, Kakper stared up at the tent ceiling. Outside, the forest was alive with its nocturnal sounds, the hoot of owls, the crackling of branches under the hooves of forest creatures, and the wind rustling in the treetops. It was the language of the forest, ancient and mysterious. Kakper listened, unaware that soon he would need to understand it to survive. July 16th, 1997, the second day of their journey. I woke up before everyone else. The sun had just risen, but the forest was already alive. I saw tracks of deer and wild boars by the stream. Gerziger says that if we're quiet, we might even spot wolves, though I'd rather see an elk. Today we're heading towards an old oak. It's said to be over 400 years old. I wonder how many stories it has witnessed. Commissioner paused and glanced at the room. Some were taking notes, others staring at the wall, imagining what had happened 15 years ago. "The first pages of the journal are ordinary," he said, flipping through the pages. "Typical notes from a teenager on a trip. It's only on the third day that something unsettling happens. July 17th, 1997, third day. Something strange happened this morning. We found tracks near our camp. Someone was watching us at night. Gerzigers thinks it was just a ranger checking for rule breaking. Victor jokes it's the poacher we heard about in Hinoka. Nicodem is scared and wants to turn back. I don't know what to think. The tracks looked human, but who would walk through the forest at night? We moved the camp 2 kilometers closer to the Houtownia River. Gerziger says it's a good spot, near a meadow where bison sometimes come. I hope we see them. I took some photos of rare mushrooms today. Mr. Novitsky will be pleased. Nicodem is still on edge, but Victor is trying to cheer him up with jokes. Later, Victor and I went to the river to fish for dinner. That's when I got the strange feeling again that we were being watched. I turned quickly, thinking I saw movement between the trees. But when I told Victor, he just laughed. Maybe I have too vivid an imagination. The commissioner looked up at Marit Borowski. In 1997, were there any reports of poachers in this part of the forest? Marit nodded. Yes, we had a few reports, mostly about snares for deer and wild boars. We never caught the perpetrator, but the tracks suggested they knew the forest well. The commissioner jotted down some notes before returning to the journal. July 18, 1997, 4th day. Something happened today that scared us all. This morning, we found a dead fox near our camp. Someone left it by the extinguished fire with a bullet wound. It's a clear warning. Nicodem cried and wanted to leave immediately. To be honest, I'm scared too. Gerzigers tried to contact the rangers over the radio, but we couldn't get a signal. We decided to change our plans and head toward the Grushki Lodge. Mr. Lipivsky was supposed to pick us up in 2 days. It's safer to wait there than risk running into whoever did this. Victor thinks it's just some local kids playing a prank, but I saw the tracks. They weren't from children. And who would give a kid a hunting rifle? No, it's the poacher. I'm afraid we've entered his territory, and now he wants to scare us. We're trying to act normal, but the atmosphere is tense. Victor stopped joking. Nicodem barely speaks, and Gerzigers keeps checking the map, looking for the quickest way to the lodge. I'm writing all this because I promised Mom I would keep a journal, but also because it helps me stay calm. I hope the night goes without incident, and tomorrow we'll reach the lodge safely. The commissioner closed the journal and looked at the group. That's the end of the regular entries. The next note is from July 19th, and it's short and chaotic. It looks like it was written in a hurry. He opened the journal again and read the last entry from this section. July 19th, early morning. I'm running. We split up. The poacher set a trap. Gerzigers was shot in the leg. Victor and Nicodem ran for help, and I stayed with Gerzigers. But then we heard footsteps. Gerzigers told me to run. I didn't want to leave him, but he insisted. He said I'd slow him down, so I ran. God, I hope he's okay. I don't know where I am. I lost the trail. I'm trying to find my way to the Grushki Lodge, but I think I'm just going in circles. I hear ... The entry ends abruptly. The commissioner paused again. The next pages are from a different date, July 20th, and the handwriting has changed. It looks like the author was injured or exhausted. The room fell silent as everyone tried to imagine what had happened to Kakper-Vilcek that morning in the forest. We need to check what happened to the other boys, the commissioner said, breaking the silence. Does anyone remember any details about this case from 15 years ago? Marek Borowski raised his hand. According to reports, 2 boys returned. Viktor Moravsky and Nicodem Zayak. They claimed to have gotten lost in the forest and lost contact with Kakper and Gerzigers. They didn't mention anything about the poacher or that Gerzigers was shot. They just said the group split up during a storm. So they lied, the commissioner noted, scribbling something in his notebook. The question is why? July 20th, 1997. I don't know how much time has passed. A day? 2? I've lost track of time. After I ran away, I wandered for hours. At one point, I heard gunshots. 2, and silence. I'm afraid it was Gerzigers. No, I can't think about that. I ran without purpose until I collapsed from exhaustion under a tree. I must have fallen asleep because I woke up after dark, soaked from the rain. I tried to get my bearings, but everything looked the same. Trees, shrubs, darkness. I've never felt such fear. I spent the night curled under a fallen trunk. In the morning, I set off again, trying to go in one direction. I'm using the moss on trees to determine north, just like Dad taught me. I hope I'm heading the right way. My food supplies are almost gone. I have 2 bars and half a bottle of water. Luckily, I found a stream and refilled my bottle. I remember what Mom said about identifying edible plants. I gathered some berries and leaves from a hare's foot fern. It's not much, but it helps fight hunger. Is anyone looking for me? Did Victor and Nicodem reach the lodge? Or did something happen to them too? These thoughts are the worst. They buzz in my head like annoying flies, not letting me rest. The commissioner took a sip of water and broke the silence. In the room, there was a palpable tension as everyone waited for the next part of the journal. The next entry is from July 21, he said. Listen to this. July 21st, 1997. I found a clearing with a massive fallen oak. It looks like one of those ancient guardians of the forest, the kind that remembers the times of King Jagayo. Now it lies fallen, but even in defeat, it remains majestic. The tree trunk is so thick that even with 2 people, I couldn't wrap my arms around it. It's a good place to rest, shielded on all sides, and the trunk provides protection from the wind. I made a makeshift shelter from branches and ferns. It's not a tent, but it keeps out the rain. Luckily, the flashlight survived, so I can write at night. I'm saving the batteries and only turning it on when absolutely necessary. Today, I tried climbing a tall tree to get a better view of the area, but it didn't help. All I could see was a sea of green, no roads, villages, or signs of civilization. I'm afraid I've wandered too deep into the forest. I keep thinking about my parents. They must be going crazy with worry. I imagine Dad organizing search parties, and Mom, she's probably glued to the phone, waiting for news. I need to get back. I need to survive. July 22nd, 1997 today, I saw a bison. A majestic creature, the symbol of the forest, standing about 50 meters away, calmly watching me. For a moment, I regretted not having a camera, but quickly reminded myself that survival is more important than photos. I tried fishing in the stream, but without a rod, it's nearly impossible. I caught 1 small fish with my bare hands and roasted it over a small fire. It was the best thing I've ever eaten. I heard gunshots in the distance again. The poacher is still out here. I'm scared he's looking for me. Why did he attack us? Did we really trespass on his land? Or is there another reason? I put out the fire before dark, so the smoke wouldn't give away my position. My shoes are nearly destroyed from walking, and my feet are covered in blisters. Every step hurts, but I have to keep going. I have to find my way home. July 23rd, 1997, the worst day so far. I woke up with a high fever. I must have gotten an infection from a wound on my leg, probably from when I cut myself while running. My leg is swollen and red. I tried to clean it with water from the stream, but it didn't help much. I can barely move now. I made a makeshift crutch from a branch, but every step is a struggle. I wish I had my mom's first aid kit. Her herbs would surely help. My supplies are running out. I have some berries and a handful of hazelnuts I found yesterday. At least there's water. The stream is close to my shelter. I need to rest. Maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe tomorrow I'll find the way home. The commissioner paused. We see here the grave danger Kakbur was facing. An infection in these conditions, with no access to medicine, could quickly lead to sepsis. Was there a search underway at that time? Asked Helena Malinovska. The park director, Marek Borowski, nodded. Yes, but the search was mostly concentrated on the marked trails and areas near where the boys were last seen. No one suspected that Kakbur had gone so deep into the forest. It seems he was fleeing in panic, the commissioner observed. He may have traveled a much greater distance than the search assumed, and later, due to confusion and fear, he probably wandered in circles. The room fell silent as the picture of the lost, injured, and frightened teenager, deep in one of Europe's last primeval forests, grew clearer. And the worst was yet to come. July 24th, 1997. The fever has passed, but my leg is still swollen. I found some wild garlic in the forest and applied it to the wound. Mom always said it has antibacterial properties. I hope it helps. It's been a week since we started our trip. A week ago, we sat by the fire, roasting sausages and planning our next days. Victor was telling his silly jokes. Nicodem was worried we wouldn't have enough food, and Gerzigers promised to show us parts of the forest no guidebook could. Where are they now? Did Gerzigers survive? Did Victor and Nicodem make it for help? Nights are the hardest. When darkness falls, the forest changes. What was once majestic becomes threatening. Every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves makes me shiver. My imagination conjures up the worst scenarios. The poacher lurking in the dark, wolves drawn by the scent of my wound, wild boars becoming aggressive if they feel threatened. I try to stay calm. Dad always said panic is the worst enemy in a crisis. I'm doing what I can to survive. I'm rationing my food, drinking lots of water, resting to conserve energy. But sometimes it's hard to keep fear at bay, creeping like mist between the trees. The wooden bison my parents gave me is still with me. It's my talisman, my connection to home. I hold it in my hand when I sleep, imagining its strength flowing into me. The commissioner paused again, observing the reactions of those present. Many had their heads down, unwilling to show the emotions evoked by the words of the missing boy. We can clearly see how loneliness and isolation are affecting Kakbur's psyche, he said quietly. But despite everything, he maintains an astonishing clarity of mind. July 25th, 1997, this morning. I woke up and for a moment thought it was all just a bad dream that I'd step out of the shelter and find my friends getting breakfast ready. But reality quickly returned. I'm alone, lost, injured, but at least I'm alive. The herbs I applied to my wound seem to be helping. The swelling has gone down, and the red lines spreading from the wound have disappeared. I can walk without the crutch now, though it still hurts. I tried to leave my shelter today and find a landmark. I climbed a hill I noticed yesterday. From the top, I saw something that looked like a clearing, or maybe even an old logging road. Tomorrow, I'll head in that direction. Maybe it leads to a lodge or a village. My clothes are in tatters. My jacket tore on branches. My pants are soaked with mud and berry juice. I bathe in the stream, but without soap and a towel, it doesn't do much. My hair is matted, and my beard, which was supposed to be my first, itches unbearably. Mom wouldn't recognize me. I find myself talking to myself more and more. I think I need the sound of a human voice, even if it's my own. I tell myself stories about school, about the future. I imagine what my life will be like when I get out of here, because I will get out. I have to believe that the commissioner turned the page. Another entry, but this one is concerning. July 26, 1997. I found a road, but it doesn't lead to civilization. It's an old logging road. used once for transporting wood. The trail was overgrown and barely visible, but I followed it for hours until I came across a clearing with a dilapidated cabin. At first, I was relieved to see a human structure, but quickly realized it had been abandoned for years. The roof had collapsed, and the door hung on a single hinge. I entered with hope of finding something useful. Inside, there was little rusty. Tools, broken furniture, old newspapers. But then I found something that sent a chill down my spine. Deer antlers, tanned hides, and traps. It had to be the poacher's cabin, maybe even the one who attacked us. I didn't stay long. I grabbed a blanket that seemed clean enough and an old hunting knife. It might help for food and shelter. As I left, I had the feeling someone was watching me. I stopped a few times to listen, but all I heard were the usual forest sounds. Was it paranoia? Was someone really following me? Was the poacher back at his cabin? Does he know I was there? July 27th, 1997. Something's happening. I'm sure someone's tracking me. I saw fresh footprints by the stream where I always get water. They were too recent to be mine from yesterday. I moved my shelter deeper into the woods, to a spot in dense brush, hard to reach. It's well hidden by branches, leaves, so it should be invisible to anyone looking for me. I'm afraid to light a fire. I'm even afraid to write by flashlight, but I have to. This diary has become my only friend, my only connection to normalcy. I heard gunshots in the distance again. The poacher is still active. I have to be very careful. If it's the same man who shot Gerzigers, he won't hesitate to do the same to me. I wonder if anyone is still looking for me. Are the searches still going on? Or have they already given up? I can't think like that. They must be searching. For me, my parents would never stop looking. July 28th, 1997. Something incredible happened today. I met a man, not a poacher, but someone who might help me in the most unexpected way. In the morning, I left my shelter to look for food. The berries I'd been living on weren't enough anymore, and I was getting weaker. I decided to take a risk and set a primitive trap for small animals, using techniques my dad had shown me. I hate the thought of killing animals, but hunger is stronger. While I was tying a snare, I heard a branch snap. I froze. It wasn't the sound of a forest animal. Someone was walking, not trying to be quiet. I hid behind a tree, clutching the knife I'd found in the cabin. An older man appeared in the clearing. He was thin, with a gray beard and long hair tied in a ponytail. He wore a worn hunting jacket and carried a bag, but I didn't see any weapons. He stopped, looked around, and then said, "I know you're here. I see your tracks. I don't want to hurt you." I didn't respond. It could have been a trap. "My name is Emil Zavatsky," the man continued. "I was once a forester in the Białowieża forest. Now I live here alone. I heard someone went missing in the forest. They're looking for you." At the sound of that name, I froze. Emil Zavatsky. My father had mentioned him before we left. He was supposed to live near the Utaunia River. Could I trust him? My father had warned me to stay away from him. The man sat on a fallen tree trunk and pulled a bundle from his bag. "I have bread and sausage. I'll leave them and leave if you prefer, but I can also help you get back to civilization. The choice is yours." My hunger won. I stepped out from behind the tree, still holding the knife. I must have looked terrible dirty, unshaven, and thin. Emil Zavatsky didn't seem surprised by my appearance. He nodded and handed me the bundle of food. I ate faster than I ever had before. "Are you Kakber Vilchak?" he asked once I finished. "Eating." I nodded, too busy eating to speak. "Your parents are going crazy with worry. Hainoka is looking for you. Do you know anything about my friends?" I asked finally. "Gerzigers was shot. Wichter and Nicodem ran for help." Emil frowned. 2 boys were found 4 days ago. They said they got lost during the storm and were separated. They didn't mention a shooting. I felt the blood drain from my face. Victor and Nicodem lied. Why? What happened to Gerzigers? I can take you to the nearest village, Emil offered, but it's late. You'd be better off spending the night at my cabin, and we can leave tomorrow. It's about a 5-hour walk. I hesitated. My father had warned me about this man, but what did I have to lose? I was exhausted, hungry, and alone. And Emil didn't seem like the poacher who attacked us. Why are you helping us? I asked. Emil was silent for a while, looking off into the distance. Because I know what it's like to be alone in the forest, he said finally, and because I have my reasons for not trusting official searches. I didn't understand what he meant, but I followed him. His cabin turned out to be small, but well maintained. It wasn't like the decaying poacher's shack I had found earlier. It was clean, with books on the shelves and a small stove in the corner that provided pleasant warmth. Emil made tea from forest herbs and gave me clean, though too big, clothes. For the first time in days, I felt safe. But his words about official searches and the lies of Victor and Nicodem still troubled me. What really happened that day, and why was Emil Zavatsky, the man my father had warned me about, now my only ally? The commissioner closed the diary. This is where the entry ends. The next one is from when Kakper stayed with Emil Zavatsky. Do we have any information on him? Asked the park director, Helena Malinovska. Marek Borowski nodded. He worked as a forester until 1995. Then he left after a conflict with the director at the time. It was about some irregularities, but there was never a formal investigation. Zavatsky moved to an old forester's lodge deep in the forest and lived there alone. July 29, 1997 today. I was supposed to return home. Emil promised to drive me in his old Jeep to Hainoka. Everything was ready. I packed my few belongings, and Emil prepared some provisions. But then everything changed, and now I'm facing the hardest decision of my life. The morning began normally. Emil made breakfast scrambled eggs with mushrooms and tea. While we ate, he told me his story. He worked in Białowieża National Park for over 20 years, until 1995, when he discovered some foresters were working with poachers and illegally harvesting valuable timber. I tried to report it, he said, stirring his tea, but no one would listen. The director, Janusz Kowalczyk, said if I didn't stop, he'd make sure I'd never find work again. He had powerful friends. So what did you do? I asked. I quit and moved here. The forest became my home, my refuge. At least here, everything is simple. The trees don't lie, the animals don't cheat. When we finished breakfast, Emil looked at me seriously. Before I take you, there's something you need to see. We got into his Jeep and drove down a forest road I didn't know. After about 20 minutes, we stopped at the edge of a small clearing. Emil turned off the engine and motioned for me to be quiet. We carefully approached the forest's edge. What I saw made me freeze. 2 trucks were parked, and several men were loading huge logs onto them. There was nothing unusual about the scene except we were in the strict reserve area, where logging is strictly prohibited. This is a poacher's camp, Emil whispered. It's been here for about 300 years. It's worth a fortune on the black market. They do this regularly, twice a month. Are these the same people who attacked us? I asked, heart pounding. Emil nodded. Most likely. When they heard a group of teenagers was in the forest, they were afraid you'd stumble upon their operation. That's why they wanted to scare you. And then ... Emil hesitated. Then Gerzigers was shot. I finished the thought for him. Suddenly, one of the men in the clearing turned and looked directly at us. I froze. I recognized the face. It was Mr. Lipivsky, Gerziger's father. Mr. Lipivsky? I whispered in disbelief. He's one of the main organizers of this, Emil confirmed. He uses his position in the forestry department to identify the most valuable trees. And his son probably stumbled upon their operation by accident. Everything clicked into place. That's why Victor and Nicodem lied about being separated during the storm. They must have been intimidated or bribed. Can Gerzigers, had he survived? Could his own father ... No, I didn't want to think about it. We returned to Emil's cabin in silence. My mind was racing. What should I do? Go to the police? But who would believe a lost teenager against respected forestry workers? What if the police were involved too? I needed evidence. Finally, I said, we need photos, recordings, anything, to prove what we saw. Emil looked at me for a long time. It's dangerous. These people already tried to kill you once. They won't hesitate to do it again. But I have to do it for Gerzigers and for the forest. Emil was silent for a moment, then nodded. I have an old camera. Could I know when they plan the next logging operation? But once we do this, there's no turning back. We'll have to hide until we can give the evidence to someone we trust. And so, here I am, faced with a decision that could cost me my life. Go back home to safety, pretending I saw nothing, or stay, gather the evidence, and risk everything? I think of my parents, who must be dying with worry. Do I have the right to prolong their suffering? But I also think of Gerzigers, of justice, and of the forest that is being ruthlessly destroyed by human greed. I've made my decision. I'm staying. I'll help Emil gather the evidence, and then I'll return home, even if it means in handcuffs. July 31st, 1997, yesterday. I didn't write. We were too busy preparing. Emil has an old Zenit camera with a telephoto lens. Perfect for our task. We spent the whole day practicing how to move silently and quickly through the forest, how to choose the best spots for photos. Emil knows the forest like the back of his hand. He knows where all the paths, clearings, and cuts are. This morning, we drove in his Jeep close to the spot where we saw the trucks last. We parked a few kilometers away and walked the rest of the way. Emil showed me how to move without leaving traces, how to use the wind to keep our scent from reaching the poachers. Dogs. We reached the spot before noon and hid in thick brush on a hill, overlooking the clearing. Emil was right. The trucks arrived about an hour later. I counted 6 men, including Mr. Lipivsky and 2 others I recognized as forestry workers. They had chainsaws and professional logging equipment. I took dozens of pictures. I captured the moment they felled a massive oak, loaded logs onto the trucks, and saw Mr. Lipivsky handing an envelope to a man in a forester's uniform. We have it all on film. When they finished and left, Emil and I cautiously approached the logging site. What I saw broke my heart. The felled trees, some so wide that 3 grown men would have to join hands to embrace them. Trees that had stood for centuries, brought down by human greed. Emil said that one of these oaks could be worth a fortune on the black market, mostly used for making luxury furniture. August 1st, 1997, today, something changed everything. Emil went to the nearest village to call the journalist in Warsaw. I stayed in the cabin to go through the photos and decide which ones best document the crime. While searching through Emil's belongings for a magnifying glass, I found something that made me freeze. An old, yellowed photograph of Emil standing next to my father. They were both younger, maybe in their 20s, smiling in forester uniforms. On the back, the date, June 1979, and the inscription, Emil and Bogumy, first days at the forestry. My father and Emil were friends. Why had my father never mentioned this? Why did he warn me about Emil? When Emil returned, I immediately asked him about it. He hesitated, then sat heavily on a chair. Your father and I were not just friends. We were like brothers. We started working at the forestry together. We discovered the first cases of illegal logging together and decided to expose it. What happened? I asked, my heart racing. They threatened him, Emil replied. Kowalczyk and his men. They threatened that if he didn't stop, your mother would lose her job and you'd never get into university. Then they offered him money, a lot of money, and he accepted. I whispered, unable to believe it. Emil shook his head. He struggled at first, but in the end, he agreed to stay silent. He didn't join their operation, but he stopped fighting. I couldn't accept that. I left. I moved here. We haven't spoken for years. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My father knew all of this. He knew what was happening in the forest and stayed silent. Was that why he warned me about Emil? Because he was afraid Emil would tell me the truth? But there's something worse. Emil believes our attack wasn't accidental, that Kowalczyk and his men might have deliberately targeted our group, hoping the news would reach my father as a warning to stay silent. And that means it's all my fault. If I hadn't gone on this trip, Gerzigers would still be alive. Emil is certain Gerzigers didn't survive, that his own father, I can't even write it. What should I do now? Return home and look my father in the eye, knowing he's complicit through his silence, or stay with Emil and try to expose the truth, even if it destroys my family? One thing I know for sure. I have to find out what happened to Gerzigers. I owe him that. And I need to make sure those responsible face the consequences. August 2nd, 1997, Emil went to Białowieża today to meet the journalist. He was supposed to return by evening, but he hasn't come back yet. I'm starting to worry. What if they caught him? What if they discovered he had the evidence? I'm sitting in the cabin, listening for every sound. Outside, all I see is the dark forest and the moonlight filtering through the trees. The forest has never felt so ominous. Emil left me a pistol, just in case. He said it's for protection, that he doesn't expect trouble, but it's better to be prepared. The gun sits on the table in front of me. I've never held a gun before. I hope I never have to use it. I've been thinking a lot about my father, trying to understand his decision. Maybe he really was afraid for us, for Mom, for me. Maybe he thought there was no other choice. But is that enough of a reason to stay? Silent when the forest is being destroyed, when his friend dies? I don't know. I wish I could talk to him, hear his side. I also wonder what to tell my mom when I get home. How do I explain my absence? The truth will hurt her, but I don't want to lie to her. She always said that lies have short legs. After everything that happened, she deserves the truth. It's late now. Emil still hasn't returned. I'll try to sleep, though I doubt I'll manage. August 3rd, 1997, Emil didn't return. Something must have happened. I don't know what to do. Wait? Look for help? But where? From whom? I don't know who to trust. I'm scared to leave the cabin. What if they're nearby? What if they're waiting for me to show myself? On the other hand, what if Emil's hurt and needs help? I can't leave him. I've made my decision. I'll wait until evening. If Emil hasn't returned by then, I'll take his jeep and drive to the nearest village. From there, I'll call someone. Who? The police? But what if they're involved? I could call my parents and put them in danger. Maybe the journalist in Warsaw. Emil left me his phone number. Yes, that's probably the best option. The last entry from today was short, written with a trembling hand. Evening, I heard the jeep. Someone arrived. But it doesn't sound like Emil's car. It's someone else. They're heading towards the cabin. I'm hiding the journal under the floorboards, where Emil keeps important documents. I have the gun with me. God, help me. The regular entries end here. The commissioner flipped the page, showing everyone the last chaotic note at the very end of the journal. The handwriting was blurred, as if the author had written in a hurry or in the dark. I don't know what day it is. Maybe August 5th. I'm not sure. I'm injured. They shot me while I was fleeing the cabin. August 5th, 1997. It was Lipivsky and 2 other men. They were asking about the photos. Emil must have told them ... I don't want to believe it. Maybe they forced him. I'm hiding in an old hollow, or a hole under the roots of a fallen tree. I don't know where I am. I'm lost. The bullet went through my shoulder. I've lost a lot of blood. I'm weak. I have a fever. I hear them searching for me. They have dogs. It's only a matter of time. I regret that I won't be able to tell my parents the truth, that I won't see justice served for Gerzigers and all those innocent trees. If anyone finds this journal, please take it to my parents and tell them I love them, despite everything. The commissioner closed the journal, and a heavy silence filled the room. Some of those present were openly crying. The story of the young boy lost in the forest, who witnessed corruption and crime, had moved even the toughest officers. This is the last entry, the commissioner said quietly. We don't know what happened afterward. Did Kakper survive? Was he found by Lipiuski's men? Or did he die from his injuries and exhaustion? But now we have the journal, the park director remarked. We have evidence, the commissioner said. We can finally get justice. After 15 years, it may be hard to find irrefutable proof, he warned, but we'll do everything we can. The first step is to find Emil Zavatsky, if he's still alive, and confront Bogomil Vilchak, Kakper's father. Maret Borovsky, who had been silent, suddenly sat up. There's something I didn't mention, he said. The place where we found the journal. It's near an old forestry cabin that used to belong to Emil Zavatsky. It was searched during the initial search for Kakper, but nothing was found. Perhaps the searches were deliberately directed the wrong way, the commissioner noted. If forestry workers were involved, they could have sabotaged the search. What now? The director asked. Now. The commissioner stood up. We go to Bogomil Vilchak. After 15 years, he owes us the truth. The meeting ended, but Kakper Vilchak's words still echoed in their minds. The last confession of the boy who knew he might not survive another day, yet still thought about justice and the truth. He wanted to save the forest he loved, not just for himself, but for all. Bogomil Vilchak had changed little over the past 15 years. He was still a tall, broad man, though his once dark beard had turned completely gray, and deep wrinkles covered his face. He stood by his workbench when Commissioner Kamiowski and Marek Borovsky knocked on the door. Mr. Vilchak? The commissioner asked, showing his badge. We'd like to talk to you. Bogomil put down the chisel he was working with and looked at them tiredly. About Kakper? He asked quietly. Yes. We found his journal, the commissioner replied, pulling out a leather-bound notebook secured in a plastic bag. It had been found in the Białowieża forest, near Emil Zavatsky's old cabin. When Bogomil heard Emil's name, he froze. His face turned pale, and his hands began to shake. Emil. He whispered, He's alive? We don't know, the commissioner admitted, but your son mentioned him in his journal. He writes a lot about him. Bogomil closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength, then motioned toward the door to the living area. Let's go inside. This isn't a conversation for the workshop. They sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Kakper had eaten his last breakfast 15 years ago. Bogomil poured tea for them and sat down, staring at the journal on the table. I've read it, the commissioner said. Kakper writes about illegal logging in the reserve, about corruption in the forestry, about Mr. Lipivsky and Director Kowalczyk, and about you, Mr. Vilcek." Bogomil didn't seem surprised. He nodded as if he had been expecting this conversation for years. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "The truth would eventually come out. Maybe it's for the best. Is it true?" The commissioner asked what Kakper wrote about you knowing about the illegal logging. Bogomil took a deep breath. "Yes," he admitted, "I knew. Emil and I discovered it together. Back in the 1980s, we tried to report it, but no one listened. After the fall of communism, we thought it would end, but it only got worse. Kowalczyk organized the whole thing. The wood from the Białowieża forest, especially the old oaks, is priceless in the West furniture, decorative elements, luxury finishes. They made a fortune from it, and you stayed silent," the commissioner said. Bogomil lowered his gaze. "They threatened my family, Irina, Kakper, and then they offered money. I didn't take it, but I agreed to stay silent. Emil couldn't accept that. He left, moved to the forest. We stopped communicating, and then Kakper went on the trip. I didn't know they would be there," Bogomil added, his voice cracking. "If I had known, I would have warned him about Emil, not because Emil was dangerous, but because I feared Emil would tell him the truth about me." "What happened when Kakper went missing?" the commissioner asked. "Was he really searched for?" Bogomil shook his head. The official searches were sabotaged. Lipivsky and his men made sure the searches went in the wrong direction. I organized my own, but the forest is vast. "Did you contact Emil?" the commissioner asked. "I tried. I went to his cabin a few days after Kakper's disappearance. It was empty, like it had been abandoned in a hurry. I found blood on the floor. Then I realized it wasn't just a missing person. They got to my son." "What did you do?" the commissioner asked. "I went to Kowalczyk," Bogomil confessed. "I begged him to tell me what happened to Kakper. I threatened to expose everything, but he just laughed. He said I had no proof, and even if I did, no one would believe me. I'd just be the father looking for someone to blame." "And you gave up?" the commissioner asked in disbelief. Bogomil raised his eyes, and there was a spark in them. "No," he said. "For 15 years, I've been gathering evidence, documents, testimonies, photos, anything that could confirm what Emil and Kakper discovered. But I was missing the key piece, the testimony from Kakper. Now I have it." He stood up and walked to the cupboard, moved it aside to reveal a safe built into the wall. He opened it and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "This is everything I've collected over the years. I've been waiting for the right moment. And now, with Kakper's journal, we can finally bring them down. Kowalczyk is dead," Marek informed him. "He died 3 years ago of a heart attack. But Lipivsky is still alive," Bogomil said. "And the others involved deserve justice for what they did to the forest, for what they did to my son." The commissioner nodded, reaching for the documents. "This will help with the investigation. But what we really need is to find Emil Zawadzki, if he's still alive. If Emil survived, there's only one place he could be hiding," said Bogomil. "His grandfather's old forestry cabin, deep in the forest. No one knows about it but me. Emil showed it to me years ago. Can you take us there?" the commissioner asked. Bogomil hesitated, then nodded. Double quotes, "Yes, it's time to face the truth. Time for the forest to get justice." 3 days later, deep in the Białowieża forest, Commissioner Komiowski, Marek Borowski, and Bogomil Vilcek pushed their way through the underbrush. Bogomil led them confidently, despite the years since his last visit. 2 police officers followed behind, prepared for anything. "Not far now," Bogomil said, pointing to a rise ahead of them. "Behind this hill is a valley, and in it, Emil's old cabin." When they reached the top, they saw a small wooden cabin, almost completely covered in ivy and other plants. Only a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney indicated someone was. "Inside, someone's there," the commissioner whispered. "Let's be careful." As they descended toward the cabin, the door suddenly opened. An older man with a gray beard stood on the threshold, holding a rifle. Not another step. He called, "Who? Are you?" The commissioner started to respond, but Bogomil stepped forward. "Emil, it's me, Bogomil." The old man froze.